You should never have been chosen." Victoria's words cut through the kitchen silence like a knife. The Prophet Marcus's first wife didn't look up from the bread dough she was kneading, but every syllable carried years of accumulated resentment. Hannah Thompson froze, the flour bowl trembling in her hands. It was her third week as the seventh wife, and each day confirmed what she already suspected. It had been a terrible mistake. "Victoria is right," murmured Stephanie, the second wife, without looking at Hannah. "6 wives were already enough. Now we barely have room to breathe." The other women, Olivia, Melissa, Catherine, and Nicole, remained silent, but their glances said everything. Hannah was an intruder in a system that had worked perfectly without her. The marriage had been a farce from the beginning. Hannah remembered perfectly that day 3 weeks ago, when Prophet Marcus announced his divine revelation during morning worship. "The Lord has shown me that our spiritual family must grow," declared Marcus, before the congregation gathered in the Aichi wooden chapel of the Sacred Valley community, hidden in the Arizona mountains. "Hannah Foster must become my 7th wife to fulfill God's eternal purposes." Hannah, then 20 years old, had felt the world spin. She had come to Sacred Valley only 2 months before, fleeing an abusive family, seeking refuge and purpose. The community had seemed like the answer to her prayers, a place where she could serve God in peace. But when Marcus called her forward during the improvised ceremony, Hannah saw in the other wives' eyes a hostility that chilled her. Victoria, the first wife, maintained a neutral expression, but her hands were clenched in fists. Stephanie whispered something to Olivia that made both exchange meaningful glances. "Why her?" Catherine had murmured, thinking Hannah couldn't hear. "She doesn't even have family here to bring resources to the community." That was exactly the problem. Hannah brought no dowry, had no influential family connections, possessed no special skills that would benefit the community. She was, in the paisar, cruel words she heard Melissa whisper to Nicole the day after the wedding, completely useless. Marcus himself had made clear his expectations, or lack thereof, on the wedding night. "You must understand your place here," he said coldly, his 52 years weighing in every word. "Victoria commands the house. The other wives have their established roles. You will do what's left over." And what was left over were always the worst tasks. Cleaning the chicken coops before dawn, washing clothes in the creek's cold water, caring for children when all the others were busy with important work. Hannah slept in the smallest room in the house, more of a closet than a proper bedroom, and ate last whenever food was left over. But the worst wasn't the tasks or the tiny room. It was the constant and calculated rejection. During meals, the other wives conversed about domestic and community matters as if Hannah were invisible. When she tried to participate, she was interrupted or simply ignored. "Hannah, you forgot to wash the breakfast dishes," Victoria had said the previous morning, pointing to plates that clearly weren't her responsibility. "But I didn't have breakfast," Hannah replied, confused. "There was nothing left when I came down." "It doesn't matter. The dishes need to be washed by someone, and you're the one with the least important obligations." The hierarchy was cruel and absolute. Victoria, as first wife, controlled all aspects of the house. Stephanie handled domestic finances. Olivia supervised the children's education. Melissa managed the garden and preserves. Catherine coordinated female religious activities. Nicole managed sewing and repairs. And Hannah existed to do everything the others considered beneath their dignity. "Maybe if you were more useful," Nicole had commented one afternoon when Hannah stumbled carrying a heavy bucket of water from the well, "Prophet Marcus would see more value in you." But the last straw had been the previous week. Hannah had discovered that Marcus planned to assign his 15-year-old niece, a sweet girl named Emma who still played with dolls, as his 8th wife. "Hannah, are you listening?" Victoria's voice brought her back to the present. "I asked if you're going to join us in this morning's prayer." "Of course," Hannah replied, her voice firmer than she felt inside. She knew this wasn't really a question. The women stood up and practiced synchrony, their long dresses in somber colors whispering against the polished wooden floor. Hannah noticed how even in that moment of supposed spirituality, positions were calculated. Victoria at the center, the other wives arranged around her according to their importance in the unofficial hierarchy, and herself, always, relegated to the periphery. "Heavenly Father," Victoria began with a solemn voice, "we thank you for another day in this sacred land, away from the temptations and corruptions of the outside world." While the familiar words flowed around her, Hannah closed her eyes, but not in prayer. She was planning. In recent weeks, small seeds of doubt had germinated in her heart, nourished by observations she could no longer ignore. The way Marcus treated each wife differently depending on his mood, how the community's children were deprived of formal education to keep them pure, how any questioning was immediately labeled as lack of faith or Satan's influence. But the decisive moment had come when she discovered that Marcus planned to assign his 15-year-old niece matrimonially. A sweet girl named Emma, who still played with dolls and dreamed of being a teacher. After prayer, while the other women dispersed to their morning tasks, Hannah walked to the small barn at the back of the property. It was there they kept preserves for winter, but it was also the only place where she could find moments of true solitude. Among the jelly jars and grain sacks, she pulled out a small notebook hidden behind corn cans. In recent weeks, she had begun documenting everything she saw and heard, not just the obvious abuses, but also the subtleties of psychological control that kept all those women trapped in an invisible web of fear and false devotion. "What are you doing here?" Hannah startled, quickly hiding the notebook in the folds of her skirt. Olivia was at the barn entrance, her narrow eyes fixed on Hannah with a mixture of suspicion and something she couldn't completely identify. "Just checking the preserves," Hannah replied, trying to keep her voice casual. "Victoria asked me to count how many peach jars we still have." Olivia took a step into the barn, closing the door behind her. For a terrible moment, Hannah thought her charade had been discovered, but then Olivia did something unexpected. She looked around nervously and whispered, "You feel it too, don't you? That something is wrong here?" Hannah's heart accelerated. For 3 weeks, she had felt completely alone in her doubts, convinced she was the only one questioning Marcus's sacred teachings. The possibility of finding an ally was terrifying and hopeful at the same time. "I don't know what you're talking about," Hannah replied cautiously. Olivia moved closer, her voice becoming even lower. "My youngest daughter, Katie, asked me the other day why girls can't study like boys, and I didn't know what to answer because I wonder that too." Her hands trembled as she spoke. "And it's not just that. The way he looks at the younger girls, how he talks about preparing them for marriage, this can't be God's will." Hannah felt as if a dam had burst in her chest. Slowly, she pulled the notebook from the folds of her skirt. "Then you need to see this." In the days that followed, Hannah and Olivia developed a coded language. When Hannah said she was going to check the preserves, Olivia knew it was an invitation to meet in the barn. When Olivia commented that the garden flowers need special attention, she was signaling that there was something important. But on the third meeting, they were almost discovered. "Quick, hide that," Olivia whispered, hearing footsteps approaching the barn. Hannah shoved the notebook between flour sacks at the exact moment the door opened. Victoria appeared at the entrance, her eyes examining every suspicious corner. "What are you two doing here?" she asked, her voice loaded with distrust. "Counting the peach preserves," Olivia replied quickly. "Hannah said you asked." Victoria remained standing for long seconds that seemed like hours. Finally, she murmured, "Finish quickly. We have real work to do." Only when her footsteps completely disappeared did the two women breathe with relief. "That was close," Hannah whispered, her hands still trembling. "Very close," Olivia agreed. "But we've gained more allies. Melissa and Catherine also want to talk. And there's more. Remember the Wilson family?" Hannah froze. Everyone in the community knew about the Wilsons' crimes, or rather knew not to talk about them. "They tried to escape last year," Olivia continued, her voice barely audible. They brought the father back chained in front of everyone, the wife and 3 daughters. She swallowed hard. Marcus said they were relocated to better serve God, but no one ever saw them again. The silence that followed was heavy as lead. "That's why we have to be extremely careful," Hannah whispered, "but it's also why we can't give up." And it was Emma, Marcus's niece, who became the final catalyst. One afternoon, while Hannah helped in the community laundry, Emma approached with tears in her eyes. "Aunt Hannah," the girl whispered, "Uncle Marcus said God showed him that I should marry him next month. But I don't want to. Is that sinful of me?" Hannah dropped the clothes she was holding. "When did this happen?" "Last night. He said it's urgent because—" Emma hesitated, her cheeks blushing. "Because other families in the community are eyeing me and he needs to protect me." Emma listened to me carefully. Hannah knelt to be at the girl's height. "There's nothing wrong with you. What you're feeling isn't sin, it's your conscience. But what if I'm condemned? What if God really wants this?" Hannah looked around, making sure they were alone. "What if I told you there are other people here asking the same questions? That you're not alone?" Emma's eyes widened. "Other people?" "Yes. And maybe we can do something about it." But before Hannah could say more, she heard a voice behind her that made her blood freeze. "Interesting conversation." Hannah turned slowly and found Marcus standing a few meters away, his cold eyes fixed on her. How long had he been there? How much had he heard? "Uncle Marcus." Emma jumped, trying to appear casual. "I was just asking Aunt Hannah about the garden flowers." Marcus walked closer, his presence filling the space like a threatening shadow. "Garden flowers? How interesting." His eyes never left Hannah's face. "And what exactly were you teaching about gardening, Hannah?" Hannah forced a smile. "Just that some plants need different soil to grow properly. Some bloom better when transplanted." Transplanted. Marcus repeated the word slowly, as if he were savoring each syllable. "Be careful, Hannah. Plants that are transplanted too early, cats, or to the wrong soil may frequently die." The threat was clear as crystal. "I understand perfectly," Hannah replied, her voice surprisingly firm. Marcus turned to Emma. "Dear, your grandmother is looking for you. Go home now." Emma looked quickly at Hannah, then ran away. Marcus waited until she disappeared from sight, then moved even closer to Hannah. "You know," he said, his voice low and dangerous, "I constantly wonder why God showed me that you should be my wife. You brought no wealth, no connections, no children." He paused. "But maybe he wanted to teach me something about dealing with rebellious spirits." Hannah felt every muscle in her body tense but kept her gaze steady. "Maybe he wanted to teach you something about free will." For a moment, Marcus seemed genuinely surprised. Then, to Hannah's horror, he smiled. "Free will? What an interesting concept." He leaned closer. "You have free will to choose obedience or consequences, just like the Wilson family chose." That night, Hannah could barely sleep. It was time to act, and there was no time for hesitation. The plan was dangerous, but necessary. Hannah had used her morning walks to map escape routes, but discovered something disturbing. Guards were discreetly posted at the community exits since the Wilson incident. "How are we going to get past the guards?" Olivia asked during a tense meeting in the barn. "I saw David talking on the radio near the main road," Hannah replied. "They have constant communication." Melissa, who had joined the group the previous week, looked pale. "What if we're caught?" "We won't be," Hannah said with more confidence than she felt. "I've established contact with a pastor in the neighboring town. Pastor Williams from Cedar Falls Baptist Church. He helps people like us." "How did you manage to do that?" Catherine asked, incredulous. "During the last trip to the market, I pretended I was sick and went into the church." Hannah took a deep breath. "He has a plan. But we have to go tomorrow night." "Why tomorrow?" Because the day after tomorrow, Emma will be forced into marriage. That's when Nicole, who had remained silent, spoke. I can't go. Everyone turned to her, shocked. Nicole? Olivia whispered. I have 3 small children here. What if something goes wrong? What if we can't reach the pastor? My children will be orphans. Hannah felt her heart sink. Nicole, you don't understand. If you stay, I understand perfectly. Nicole was crying now. But I can't risk my children. You go, but I'll stay and try to protect the other children somehow. It was exactly the kind of division Hannah had feared. And that's when they heard footsteps approaching outside the barn. Everyone froze. The footsteps stopped right in front of the barn. Hannah held her breath, her heart beating so loud she was sure whoever was outside could hear it. Olivia squeezed her hand, both waiting for the door to open at any moment. But then they heard Nicole's voice from outside. Hannah, Victoria is looking for you. All the women inside the barn exchanged confused glances. Nicole was outside, but Nicole was also inside. I'm coming, Hannah replied, trying to keep her voice normal. The footsteps slowly moved away. Wait, Catherine whispered. If Nicole is here with us, who was out there? The realization hit everyone at the same time. Someone had imitated Nicole's voice. Someone knew about their meetings. We've been discovered, Melissa murmured, terror evident in her voice. Not necessarily, Hannah said quickly, though her own fear was growing. It might have just been. The barn door opened violently. Marcus stood at the entrance, accompanied by 2 guards. His eyes examined each face with cruel satisfaction. Well, he said slowly. What an interesting meeting. Hannah positioned herself in front of the other women. We were just planning a little trip? Marcus interrupted. Yes, I know. David intercepted your communications with dear Pastor Williams. Hannah's heart sank. How had they been so careless? Now, Marcus continued, you have a choice. You can return to your homes, forget this nonsense, and never speak of it again. Or, he paused dramatically, you can discover what happened to the Wilson family personally. It was Olivia who spoke first. What if we choose to return? Then, Emma will marry me tomorrow as planned, and you will continue your lives as obedient wives. Marcus smiled coldly. But if there's another attempt, well, there won't be a second chance. Hannah closed her eyes, feeling the weight of defeat. But then, a small but firm voice cut through the silence. I choose to leave. Everyone turned. Emma was standing at the barn entrance, her hands trembling but her chin raised defiantly. Emma, Marcus roared, go home now. No. The girl's voice was stronger now. You're not God, Uncle Marcus, and I won't marry you. What happened next changed everything. Marcus advanced toward Emma, but Hannah positioned herself between them. Don't touch her. Get out of the way, Hannah, or you'll suffer the consequences. The consequences? Hannah laughed, but it was a sound without humor. What consequences? Make me clean more chicken coops? Give me even less food? Lock me in the smallest room in the house? She took a step forward. You've already done all that. You have nothing left to take from me. Marcus hesitated, clearly not expecting such resistance. But I have something you want, Hannah continued. I have these women's loyalty. And you, know why? Because I treat them like human beings, not property. Guards, Marcus shouted. But when he turned, he discovered the guards had disappeared. In their place, several women from the community were gathered, including Victoria. You're alone, Marcus, Victoria said calmly. And we're tired. What followed was a confrontation that shook Sacred Valley's foundations. But more importantly, it was the moment Hannah realized that true escape wasn't just physical. It was emotional and spiritual. The physical escape happened 3 days later. With the public revelation of organized resistance, Marcus had lost much of his control. External communications were cut, but it was too late. Pastor Williams had already alerted the authorities. On the chosen night, 17 people gathered in the barn, women, teenagers, and some children. But there was a problem. Only one vehicle had managed to reach them. "You're going in 2 groups," Pastor Williams explained quickly. "I'll come back in 2 hours for the second." That's when they heard the barking, hunting dogs approaching rapidly. "They've discovered us," Catherine whispered. "Get on the bus now," Pastor Williams ordered. "But not everyone fits. Mothers with small children first," Hannah shouted. The barking was closer. Through the darkness, they could see flashlight, beams moving in their direction. Hannah looked at the 9 women who wouldn't be able to go in the first group. "Listen to me. Hide in the forest until the pastor returns. No matter what happens, don't go back to the community." "What about you?" Emma asked. "I'm going with you in the first group," Hannah began, but then saw the fear in the eyes of the women who would stay behind. The dogs were less than 100 meters away now. Hannah made the most difficult decision of her life. "I'm staying. Someone needs to lead the second group." "Hannah, no!" Olivia screamed. "Take care of Emma. And remember, you're not anyone's property." The bus pulled away. At the exact moment the first flashlights appeared around the road curve, Hannah and the other 8 women ran into the forest, but not all managed to escape. 3 were captured in that first escape attempt by Pastor Williams. Of the 17 who tried to flee, only 14 achieved freedom. 3 women were recaptured and never seen again. Hannah would carry that guilt forever, but would also carry the responsibility to honor their sacrifice. 2 years later, Hannah Thompson stood behind the pulpit of a small church in Phoenix, Arizona. It didn't have the grandeur of Sacred Valley's chapel, but it possessed something Marcus's community never had: authenticity. "Freedom," she said to the 50-person congregation, "is not the absence of faith. It's the ability to make choices based on love, marriages." Olivia ran a community center offering adult literacy. Emma, now 17, wanted to study international law. After the service, a young woman approached hesitantly. Long dress, hair in a tight bun, eyes full of the same fear and hope Hannah recognized. "Pastor Hannah, I'm Michelle. I came from a community in Colorado. I heard you help people like me." Hannah touched her grandmother's small Bible that she now always carried, no longer hidden but open on her table, marked with personal reflections. "Yes, Michelle, we help, and you're not alone anymore." 3 months later, Hannah received a letter that made her cry with joy. It was from Emma. "Dear Aunt Hannah, you saved me not just from that marriage, but from a lifetime without knowing my own worth. I decided to study international law to help girls around the world. You taught me that sometimes disobedience is the highest form of obedience to God." Hannah folded the letter and placed it in her Bible. Outside, she could hear children playing, including some who had grown up in isolated communities and were now discovering the joy of choosing their own dreams. Hannah's story wasn't just about fleeing oppression. It was about discovering that true faith doesn't fear questions, doesn't oppress the vulnerable, and doesn't transform fear into virtue. It was about understanding that sometimes the holiest rebellion is one that frees not just ourselves, but opens the way for others to find their freedom too. Connect with us. If this story touched your heart, follow our channel for more inspiring narratives about courage, faith, and freedom. Share with people who might need to hear that it's never too late to seek an authentic life. Together, we can spread stories that transform lives.